Charlie to Trader 1886. Where is your emergency?
Yeah, hi. I'm on the 106th floor of the World Trade Center. We just had an explosion on the 106th floor.
The 106th floor?
Yes.
All right, what's your phone number there? All right, we're there. We're coming up to get you.
A person named Osama bin Laden are linked to many other organizations in different countries to plot evil and destruction. Deliver to United States authorities all the leaders of Al-Qaeda who hide in your land. We will never be intimidated by thugs and assassins. We will defeat the enemy and win the war on terror.
You know, it's a family legacy, really. It's about my grandpa's. I think it was just yesterday was the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And my grandpa Carl was part of the troops that stormed Normandy. And then I had uncles in Vietnam. And it was my turn, you know, and so when it came my turn, I just felt like it was the right thing to do. And that's, you know, and I also wanted to go to college.
I was born in Germany in 1980. My grandfather served in World War II in the Navy. My dad served Marine Corps, Navy, Army. My uncle served in the Marine Corps, so it was inevitable, I suspect. I gave up 2 full-ride scholarships to actually join the Marine Corps. I got to see like the fall of communism in the Soviet Union. I was there when the Berlin Wall fell as a kid. My mother brought a claw hammer, no chisel. She started whacking on the wall next to a bunch of German citizens because the wall had just come down, right? So like reunification was imminent. This was like October of '89, October, November. MPs quickly came over to her and was like, hey, ma'am, that's actually German government property. Like, you can't do that. Like, we're gonna, please stop or we'll have to arrest you, kind of thing. And one of the German civilians next to us was chiseling away and handed me a bunch of pieces of it, and gave my mother some of it too, so. But yeah, my father was in his dress uniform, and the East German guards saluted him when he came across the border because he was an officer. And yeah, I got to see what communism looked like firsthand.
The first, for the longest, I wanted to be a stockbroker. I can't be exactly sure why that came about. I kind of got infatuated with the stock market and numbers and, you know, watching the bars and the graphs and that kind of thing. So I wanted to be a stockbroker. And kind of paralleled with that was I wanted to play in a World Cup. Soccer's my thing. Pele, if you want to say or ask, you know, if I have ever had an idol, Pele was my idol growing up. I loved everything Pele, everything Brazil relative to the team, and you know, played soccer my whole life, so wanted to be one of those two things.
There was a guy that I dated briefly in high school, and he became a United States Marine. Great guy. We were friends even after we broke up. But he was coming home to spend time with his family for the 4th of July, and he was murdered on the 4th of July, and it was something that really changed our small community. Definitely, you know, his family's never really been the same by losing him so young, and I didn't initially plan on serving, but when I was in my first year of college, it was kind of something I continued to think about, that his legacy, his desire to serve ended so abruptly, and I became a Marine in 2003. So not too much further after we lost Bart.
I knew I was going to either end up, in a bad place, so dead, or just going down the wrong path, I guess. And I wanted to be a SEAL. Right? I guess, a lot of young kids, we see action, we see guys shooting guns, blowing up stuff, and I just thought what they did was really awesome. It was cool. So I figured, you know what, I'm going to join the Navy. I want to be a SEAL, and those two things were really the deciding factors for me joining, to be honest.
My perception of the military was just like the commercials, man. I was jumping out of helicopters with like a minigun strapped to my back, like in Predator. But yeah, it's not similar to that at all. I didn't get the minigun, but I did get the ID tag. Back in the day, we called them dog tags. And those are honestly one of the sexiest things I think I ever wanted out of the military. I just wanted a pair of tags. So yeah, that's the real motivation for those of you who didn't know.
So I have some uncles that I grew up with, and they served in the Army in El Salvador. Seeing them growing up, what they did and hearing stories about them, that's what kind of motivated me to want to serve. I also have an uncle who was in the Army here, served for the United States Army, and he when I made a decision to join, he was a drill sergeant. And so when I spoke to him about it, that really kind of influenced me to join the Army specifically.
It was interesting because for me, it came out of the blue, really. It was just kind of like an epiphany, like I gotta do something different. Because looking around, growing up where I grew up, you either end up in two places, and then neither of them are good. So I had to make that choice whether I was gonna go down that road or try to figure something else out. So that was really what drove me to that point to kind of say I'm gonna do better for myself. And I took that leap, that first step.
So this is a picture of my my Aunt Jeannie. She was phenomenal. She was in the Marine Corps, and man, she did bodybuilding competitively. She was a jewelry like wholesaler herself. Like on trips over there. She actually took me skydiving for the first time in my life. It was tandem, which I thought was going to be way better than it was. I was highly disappointed. We'll never go tandem again. But that definitely helped drive me towards skydiving, to be honest. She did everything.
I was in the Marine Corps Reserves. And my father passed away suddenly. Watched him die screaming, and it was one of the most horrific things I've ever encountered. The last thing my old man and I did was fight. And it's a guilt that I carried with me for countless years. I've gotten over it, and I kind of put it to rest, but I was running with my high school buddies, just not really grown up. And he was like, the last thing he said to me was like, you should have gone active duty, you should have gotten the fuck out of here and seen the world and done something with your life. And now you're not doing nothing. And in traditional varsity blues fashion, I was like, I don't want your life, kind of bullshit. And after he died, like I was lost, man. It just so happened that I knew the Army recruiter, and he saw me one day. I was putzing around town. He's like, dude, what are you doing here, man? Like, get out and go do something. And he's like, hey, man, you ever thought about joining the Army? And I was like, not really. And he's like, I can get you a Ranger Regiment slot. And I was like, huh.
I had a hard time kind of thinking of this answer, and I had to do some soul searching to think about why I wanted to join for real. Because there's some literal answers that I could give, but there's some answers that kind of creep below the surface of me that I keep compartmentalized. And, right off the top, my dad served. He served for 12 years. I was born in Germany, so I was surrounded by military. I think being surrounded by that culture kind of teaches you a little bit of service, teaches you, or at least sensitizes you to the notion of service or something greater than. I like that. I like that sense, that to know that you could serve something greater than yourself. But I served really because of 9/11.
I served 12 years. Things were going really great. But I was in the National Guard, and I had a civilian career. I was a pretty new police officer, and I was gone all the time, it seemed, between my military and my police. And my wife she gave me an ultimatum. It was like, you need to choose. Your family needs you to be here part of the time, because I was gone all the time. So I got out. Then 9/11 happens, and I'll never forget it. He was white as a ghost. And he said, "Have you heard, Shawn?" And I said, "Heard what?" His name's Randy. I said, "Heard what, Randy?" He said, "I think we're under attack. You might want to go back to the police station and find out."
It's one of those things where it's like, this can't be happening here now. And it literally, as we're coming back from where we were working, at the time I'm working for a bank, and we did a launch on the business banking, so we're out in the community kind of shopping this around, and we got a call from the office, "You guys have to come back." And we come back, and they got it on the screen in the lobby, and as we're watching it, a second plane goes right into the towers. I'm like, that's not an accident. There's no way that's an accident. And I just remember, man, like, who and why, you know? So it was disbelief, and then the shock of it really happening in real time.
You know, I knew bad stuff was happening at that point. I mean, any one of us can put that together. 2 aircrafts, there ain't no coincidence in this deal.
That day kind of changed everything for me. Waking up, I was in high school, and seeing the towers fall that day. I was in JROTC at that time, and I remember the school forcing us to go back home to change we had to wear uniforms like once a week as part of the JROTC policy. And that day happened to be that day to wear uniforms, and they sent us all home. I remember changing into civilian gear and coming back to school and seeing the second tower fall, and friends of mine in class just looking at me saying, like, "We're gonna go to war."
I knew we were going to war. That was kind of a no-brainer. You're itching, man. We were all itching. Like, this is what we're trying to do. Like oath says, defend the nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So we're definitely looking to kill some motherfuckers. I'm being blunt as possible, man. You just attacked the United States. We're looking for some motherfucking payback. Pardon my French. But yeah, I mean, that's the level of aggression that was there. You had just a bunch of door-kicking infantrymen that just wanted to go out and shoot the shit out of bad guys.
Sitting in that classroom watching the towers fall, then after the recruiters come into my high school, I knew we were going to go to war. After that, especially with everybody gearing up to invade Afghanistan, I just didn't think it was fair that others had to go out and serve and me reap the benefits of others' service. That I get to stay home and feel protected while others get to sacrifice their time. I didn't feel right about that. So I knew, even as a 17-year-old, that I really wanted to step up.
So 9/11 had happened, right? But I was in the process of getting out. I'd already put all my paperwork in. And then I don't know, it was like 18 months later, I'm back in. And that's kind of how it happened. I got this letter from the president, and I'm sure it was a form letter, and he sent it to everybody that was a veteran. And I can remember it. It says, Sergeant Banzhaf, the country needs you. Please consider re-enlisting. And so I took that letter to my wife, and I said, well, the president's asked me to get back in. Of course, she just laughed at me a little bit and said, Shawn, everybody gets one of those letters. I said, yeah, but this one says my name.
So recruit training's not very long, but, you know, it is one of those environments where you see right away either someone's going to be part of the team and someone's not. So one of the individuals that was kind of in my line of our racks, our beds, she was not fitting in well and basically had an adult temper tantrum. It was the weirdest thing. I never expected. You know, I know sometimes like women can be dramatic, just like some men can be dramatic, but she was pitching a fit, and the drill instructors are like, "Oh, you're gonna quit, you're gonna quit, you're gonna quit," and she basically was like, yes, ma'am, and basically like, well, if you're gonna quit, you're gonna ring the bell. And I thought that was weird because we don't do that. But they had her ring an imaginary bell, and she basically was like, ding, 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 I'm done. And yeah, like she was separated. I mean, she was just there one day and gone. And I don't know what all the out processing is to have someone leave recruit training. But I remember thinking, oh, like, they're serious. And I may not be a good fit for the Marine Corps, but I'm not that bad of a fit. So I'm like, we're doing okay in life.
When I arrived at Fort Campbell, and they told us, oh, you're with, 63rd, and you can be with 3rd Platoon. But 3rd Platoon was not there at that time. They were in New York. They had orders to go to West Point to go train cadets. And so we were there maybe like 2-3 weeks before the platoon actually got there, and we were able to, join them. So I got to hang out with, the other platoons, the other people, and hanging out with them, they were like, you and Cruz are going to hit it off. And I kept hearing about Cruz. And I was like, who is this guy? Like, why does everybody talk about him? And I just imagined this like really like arrogant guy, like, but totally. Wow. I was completely wrong.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, the first day we met, it was like on a weekend, and I'm sure you guys remember how barracks were and get crazy on the weekends. And we had one of the sergeants wake us up at like 6 in the morning because there was a mess everywhere and we needed to wake up and clean up. And so that's when we first met, and it was funny the way we met. He didn't want to tell me his name. He said, you'll find out tomorrow. You need Monday information.
Wow. I was the one playing games? Wow.
And then lo and behold, this was Cruz.
Oh, wow.
Tell me it didn't happen like that.
Different version of the same story.
Oh, gosh.
No, just like...
That first unit was very hard. I was the only female Marine that was there. And my leadership had talked about how the last woman that was there didn't leave a positive impression. So I had a lot more pressure on me to like, hey, like you're coming to us with great physical fitness scores, like keep that up, set yourself apart, and the men here will respect you. And I don't think we put that same sort of pressure on other men, but it was like, okay. And as far as like a real close, like female like connection, like a real like best friend, I actually didn't have one of those until I came back from my first tour in Iraq. And one of the women that ended up being my roommate, we got along incredibly, and she did help me through a pretty difficult time in my life.
This was around, obviously before 9/11, but definitely during the 9/11 time frame. I was in the Special Operations community, and one of the commands I was at, This is just a couple of clips, pictures from there. Just a couple of the boats that we had. You know, one of the PCs. You know, a 11-meter rib. And as you can see, we got the Jolly Roger on here because that's just kind of the trademark of some of the guys, you know, the boat guys. And they would run those every once in a while on the boats. But yeah, so yeah, it was just a couple of pictures, you know, that kind of take me back to some fun times in my career. Yeah, that I just enjoy. You know, I remember these like they were yesterday.
They told us that we were going to do the longest air assault in history. We flew to the Pakistan border from Kabul because we were on a rotation. Once a month, we'd rotate out of Kabul and into Bagram, and then reverse it back again. So we were always constantly on the move for the 6 months we were there. So with the aircraft we had, so we were in Chinooks, and that was the S3 RTO. I had a TACSAT radio, it's a little satellite uplink thing, and I figured out how to use it, and the comms guys taught me. So I was an infantry guy. They strapped the radio to my ass, and bingo bongo, I get to go on every op, working for the 3. And basically it was like, you know, land in the mountains, hump down, surround a village, corner on search, find bad guys, kill, capture, that kind of thing. Get picked up, do the same thing. Like we were humping so much, minimum equipment, like we didn't even pack water to shave, like we only packed water to drink.
So you know that song by Rihanna, We Fell in Love in a Hopeless Place? Like literally, we fell in love in a hopeless place. I think just we really got to know each other. There was no, you know, like there was no like filters. There was no like putting on, getting ready for, you know, like a date, or having the time to kind of think about like, oh, what are we gonna do? Or like he saw me for who I was, you know, who I am in that moment, which was like the rawest, you know, that someone can be. So I think that's what, you know, kind of helped us grow. It was really truly like a friendship. You know, we had each other's back. I mean, every day out there sucked. Like, it's not like there was a day that you're like, oh yeah, that was a good day. No, every day out there sucked. So it was just nice to have, you know, someone that understood, you know, what that was, and just have like that support.
My buddy Rich, he was a E5, I was an E6. We were in Iraq together. He was one of my team leaders. I was his squad leader. Part of the bond is because I think we have trauma bonding. You know, we're in combat together, and he and I, we were on 100 missions together, back to back, taking care of each other, and eating Burger King at the PX and BIOP, and our favorite cookies are the same. We both like Nutter Butters, you know, like there are so many little things. He had a wife and 2 kids that he left at home. I had a wife and 2 kids that we left at home. He's about my age. So you know, all those things, I think Rich and I are real close. We're still real close. And our friendship was tested over there, I can tell you that. You know, the night that we missed the IED that blew up our buddy, you know, he kind of blamed me, and he wasn't afraid to tell me about it. So it was tested, but friendship, you can get through those things too. So yeah, he's special to me.
One of my great buddies at the time, Sergeant First Class Nigel Campbell, he was the guy I first deployed with. He was our NCOIC, and the 2 of us together, man, we got each other through that initial deployment, through laughter, through anger, through moments of having to really dig deep and motivate each other. And he, to this day, like one of my best bros, and that's just one of the many people that I've come across in my life. But I would say is probably my first really ingrained military relationship that I've maintained throughout.
if I had a funny story for you on this one, so Jim was part of the first. He was part of the Advon going into Iraq or into Kuwait before we drove across the border, and so he's one of the first guys there, having to get ready for the battlefield, all that kind of shit as an intel guy, and so when we got the word that hey, we're rotating out at the year mark, we packed up all of our connexes, customs that came through, and secured everything. We're going to drive out of Iraq back into Kuwait, and we got notified by CNN that 2 units in the United States Army were being extended, and we're just like looking at each other, and we're like, "Oh shit, man! Well, it's us or second ACR, and since we're the last guy still standing in the country, lo and behold, man, battalion commander came out the next day, and he's like, "Hey, boys, we got to stick around a little bit longer," and I got to go pick Jim back up at the airport because he got to go back to Germany first, and it was fucking hilarious, man, because he steps off the aircraft and you can tell he's hungover. And I was like, "Welcome back, buddy. Like, did you miss me?" And we were back in the shit all over again, man. But you know, that's that.
So we know that when people perceive social support, their PTSD symptoms are likely to be lower or they're less likely to have a diagnosis. You know, one of the things that we hear military service members talking about is like, it's easy to talk to someone else who's in uniform because they get it, where it's hard to talk to a civilian. And usually with a civilian, sometimes it's because they're just asking questions that are really insensitive. Or you have a service member, again, in that generosity of spirit and thinking of other people. It's like, I don't want to traumatize this person with what I'm going to tell them. One of the things that we found that was completely unexpected, and I still don't know what to think about it, which is why we wrote this latest grant, was that the support received from people who are not in the military was actually associated with lower PTSD symptoms. So even though we are hearing these anecdotal reports, it's so much easier for me to talk to someone in uniform. I do believe that to be true. But from a clinical perspective, I think it's easier to talk to someone in uniform because they understand it, where if you're having to explain it to someone who doesn't understand it, I think you connect with the information that you're sharing in a much more intimate way and a much more knowledgeable and vulnerable way. And that's my guess as to what was happening, is that when they're talking to civilians, they have to explain it differently. They probably have to give different details. And I think, you know, in terms of what we were talking about before, like re-victimization, like those memories are coming up, and that's part of the healing process of PTSD. They're telling the story again, and hopefully they're getting some good input from the people around them, and maybe that's what's making their PTSD symptoms go down. So that's what we're working on right now, is trying to understand, like, okay, of the people you talk to, who's responding well, who's not responding well, and when people are responding well, what does well actually mean? Sometimes people will say like, "Oh, I don't want you to remember that," or like, "Oh, I don't want you thinking that," or like, "Oh, it's going to be okay." Maybe it's not going to be okay. Like telling somebody right off the bat it's going to be okay. I mean, there's maybe a time and a place for that. Like they don't teach us that in our doc programs, and so it just doesn't even register in my mind. But sometimes sitting next to someone and saying, "It's not going to be okay," can be the most powerful thing because it's the truth. And knowing that you can sit with someone who can hold what might feel like that ugly truth, there's some power and there's some love and support in that. And so that's what we're trying to figure out with this new work.
I was a never been deployed counterintelligence agent with the Army. I had deployed with the Navy, done that, but that was under a different job. And when it came time for the Army, I was just so excited to go out there and serve and to do my job, to be a counterintelligence agent. And I got to Afghanistan, and there's explosions. And my buddy wakes up and he's like, "What's that?" And I was like, "Don't worry, dude, it's just IDF. We're good. It's in the distance," right? That is kind of a good example of how almost all of that deployment went. I was in a lot of places where people were rocketing us. We were being attacked. But if you've ever lived in one of those places, you know that a rocket either hits you or it doesn't. It's kind of a binary state of life. You're either alive or you're dead. And when you're there for too long, you just start to, I don't know, be careless. And you're just like, you know, I'm either gonna be alive or I'm gonna be dead, and I can't pick.
We're keeping this route open. This is a big route for logistics, for coalition forces. Mainly we keep a presence and we look for IEDs, any kind of a suspicious activity.
Our job in the rad truck was, you got eyes on, you do the best you can to say, yeah, I see wires. You know, it could be just a lump of dirt that don't look right. It's just a lump of dirt, a rock. You know, the IED that blew Dennis up was an MRE bag, you know. And I was so angry at myself because part of what they told you during your training leading up was, hey, they're using our trash to blow us up. And you're like, yeah, whatever. Like, I'll know that. MRE bag in the middle of the road. You just think it's an MRE bag. No, it was. And actually, the bomb wasn't in the MRE bag, and there wasn't even a pressure plate in it. And we found out later that it was to get you to stop so that they could command dead it.
Get out! Get out! Get out!
One of those things where it literally, everything's vibrating. Like, you know, it's like, where did that hit? What, like, how close were we? And you're trying to, you know, you can't really engage in those types of attacks, right? It's not small arms fire. This is, you know, rocket or mortar attacks. You just have to, you kind of get to a point where you don't really get numb to it, but you're like, okay, that one didn't have my name on it. But someone's name was on it. You know, sometimes, you know, that's the dirty part of this game. There was someone's name on that mortar or that rocket. And as a veteran, you just kind of, you understand it could be you. You understand that, you know, you could have very well been the soldier in that position. It could have been next to that soldier, the Humvee that lost an arm and a leg due to an IED. You can sometimes get the survivor's guilt, or, you know, well, why wasn't it me? I was told to be sitting on the left side, but you can't overanalyze because everything just happens for a reason. I don't know if you want to call it divine intervention or fate or whatever, but it's something you can't control. You have no control over what happens. You try your best to mitigate and plan and all that stuff. Plan goes out the window the first time a round is fired. So you do the best you can to prepare for the best. You know, prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
They would actually work with the locals to dig up the asphalt. And they would plant the bomb in the asphalt, and they'd put new asphalt back over it. And then the line going out would be the stick on the lollipop. So it's just a hole about this big, brand new asphalt. You can't see that. It just looks like everything else. I was always probably the most afraid of those because it just looks like what it looks like. So, yeah. And they would use like little markers. So because the the command detonated ones, they'd have to time them. So they'd stack these rocks up on the side of the road. And you'd see those, and right when you see them, you know. It's like you know you're in their timing, and to worry about that. And I remember going on my first huts for vets, for you know, mental health healing in the wildernesses before we started our treks for vets. And the last, it was great, it was the last corner of this 10-mile hike up in Aspen. You pop this hill and you come around the corner and it's one of those stacks of rocks. Of course, they're doing it just to mark out your trail. But as soon as I saw that, and I was almost dead from this hike, I just became so anxious. I hadn't seen a stack of rocks like that since I was around Baghdad, bro. So I told the guy that runs huts for vets, I said, you might not want to do that anymore. For guys like me anyway, because that freaked me out.
It was an interesting time. In some regards, it was very patriotic because you knew why you were doing what you were doing and the reason for it. But then on the back end, you know, you found out why we were really there and what we were really doing. You know, so you lost a little bit of wind in your sails a little bit, but you figured out, you know, you were still here to somehow help people. And that was kind of the driving factor that kind of kept you going, at least on my part. I mean, you had to find some kind of purpose because it was not the best of places to be at and figure yourself out in, but we figured it out and we got through it.
I know. Okay. Yeah, the biscuits in that ditch? Yeah, we're gonna go over. Okay.
People will train for combat and they will know what to do, but it becomes in the moment of the things that they have to do that you can't prepare things for. So I've treated military service members who had to take out targets that presented in the form of women and children who could have been strapped with suicide bombs. And these were people who were moms and dads, and there's no preparation that can help a mom or a dad do that. They can be a great soldier, a great airman, but that doesn't make it any easier. And so I think a lot of those factors where it starts to interface with multiple parts of your identity, that can be particularly problematic.
So this is probably my favorite picture. It's of Melvin and I, and we were in the middle of Iraq, and you can see, I think it's really cool because you can see 2 Apaches in the back, and Melvin had hair.
Wow.
And we were both very young, like extremely, maybe 20 and 18, 19, 21, probably.
21, 19.
21, 19. So yeah, so this is one of my favorite pictures.
This one was when we got an opportunity to train cadets in West Point. I've never gotten to see so much green in my life. That was a really interesting experience to see out of the city of New York to what New York really looks like. It's a beautiful place. I got the opportunity to train with a lot of amazing people that make up our academic portion of our military. Just a great experience. I recommend everybody to do it. The coolest part though is I got to run the gas chamber. Got to bring some pain to some people. Best part of my job.
So we land, we're getting off the aircraft as fast as we can, crew chiefs are yelling at us, and I look down and I have to get around this gator, so we had quads with us, so we do humanitarian aid drops. And so the gator rolls off, and then all of a sudden I look down and this fucking hand grenade rolls between my feet. And I was like, fuck it, man. It's all she wrote. Let's go. And I fucking immediately reached down and grabbed that grenade, and it was wrapped. It had fucking tape on it. And I was like, And the crew chief's like, get the fuck off the aircraft. And I was like, you mind if I take this with me? And he's like, take your time, bro. It was funny too, man. So I get off the ground, I get on the ground, and the fucking S3 N2IC, he's like, is that a fucking hand grenade? I'm like, yeah, it was, Sergeant. He's like, you can keep that. And it was funny too, because and the reason I tell this story is because I find it hilarious, is that in a war zone where we have all these munitions, you still have to account for shit. Lo and behold, the service member that lost that hand grenade on the aircraft, his first sergeant came and found me. And he's like, hey, Ross, he's like, I understand that you found something. I was like, I did, first sergeant. I was like, but I was told I could keep it. And he's like, I'll make it worth your while. And I was like, what's that? And he's like, go to the promotion board. And he's like, you come to my company, I'll give you a team. And I was like, here's your hand grenade.
I'm in the city, and our interpreter told us that there's a hyena man that exists somewhere in the city. He can get more details if we're interested. We said we're interested. I said, okay, well, what's going to happen at night? All right, let's go. So we packed up our crew, and we went looking for the hyena man. And the directions are exactly how you might think in the middle of night in a low-mapped city. It was take a left at the big tree when you see the rock stop. So that's what we did. And this man walks with this big wicker basket on his back. And there's this cat following him. And he sits down in the middle of our light, like this was planned. Like, I didn't know him, he doesn't know us. And he reaches down into this basket, and he flings up in the middle of in the air, just high up in the air, the scraps pieces of meat, raw meat, and it just lands and scatters all around him. And it was at that moment, I didn't realize and I didn't notice it, the flicker of lights right at the edge of our light from the trucks. And it was the flashing reflective irises of the dozens of hyenas that were circling this light source. And hyenas were skittish at first, but they would run up, grab a piece of meat, and run off. I sit down next to him. He's sitting down, so I sit down next to him, and I ask my interpreter, hey, just let him know I want to feed a hyena, but with the stick. And a part of me thought maybe I'm just going to reach down, grab a piece of stick, meat on the edge of the stick and feed it to the hyena. But I'm like, I can do better, right? So I put it in my mouth, and I grabbed a piece of meat, and I stuck it on the edge of this very short stick. And while I was doing that, I didn't realize the largest of the hyenas was approaching me. And when I looked up, after finishing balancing this chunk of meat, I am staring down this hyena, and all I remember seeing just the bottom of his throat, his tonsils and everything, and the smell of wild hyena just engulfed as he snaps and grabs the meat and walks away. It was like wicked.
This is laffa bread. I actually found out about it on a documentary that was about Jerusalem and how complicated the history of Jerusalem is. And I never actually tried any Iraqi bread when I was there. I sort of had the opportunity the second tour, but I was kind of nervous. Like I told you, some of the local vendors, they make their bread, but they like carry it under their arms. And I'm just like, I'm an American kid, and I grow up like my bread comes in the store prepackaged. Right. Like there's a way I look for presentation. So I was unfortunately just very judgmental about how the bread was like getting to people.
Different from how we present.
Yeah, so I felt more safe. Like let me make my own, and then I can control my environment. This bread, I never had it overseas, but I've made it a couple times, and in particular, I made it with my daughter during the pandemic. So it was really hard, her being a young child, losing her whole like school like network, and having a very unstructured existence as a 10-year-old. So this was kind of nice. It was a way for me to kind of like hold her in place and make her do something. So we want to get the salt and the flour, and then we're going to get the olive oil. Okay. So I can see some of the flour, it just kind of soaked up the oil and everything, but the dough hasn't come together. So I need to actually So this isn't perfect, but
it looks pretty good though. You did a good
yeah.
job,
So
though.
the big thing I wanted to make sure that we took care of is there was clumps of flour that were coming together.
So you worked all of those through, right?
I think I got all of them. So that's part of what I was doing is just pulling the dough back. One, it helps with the gluten development, but then it also gives me a chance to see what was on the bottom. Yeah, so like this past year, I've really actually relied a lot more on my husband and my daughter with prepping food. So like especially chopping ingredients right now, stirring ingredients, moving like this is not too bad, but if I had to carry it like across the house, like let's say to put it in like a fridge or freezer, I'd probably be feeling that later on. So it's nice that I have the support of family.
Yeah, hopefully they get to learn too while you're, you know.
Yeah, my daughter's finally old enough that I think she likes having something like some skill building, like she can show off that she can do things. I'm the one who's like, please don't burn yourself. And she's like, I'm fine. I'm like, all right, I've got a teenager. That's, would you mind covering it for me? So what we wanna do is we wanna actually give this time to rest so the gluten develops a little bit more. And in particular, we wanna leave it in like a warm place so we can speed that process along. It takes like an hour, maybe an hour and a half. I think if we have it by the window, we'll get the results we want a little bit sooner. And then we'll put a little bit more plastic just so it doesn't dry out the dough.
One spot up here.
And the birds are out.
Yeah,
I love it. Oh, and the horse too.
Yeah,
Love it.
Everyone who serves usually pays some kind of price, and the toll for each individual is very unique. Do you feel like you can share what was the price of service to you and maybe even to your family?
Sure. I mean, I was very lucky I didn't see Captain Brock after he was hit, but he was hit right outside of the building we worked in. I still had to work there for the rest of my deployment. They didn't have resources to originally move the damaged porta-john, and the other porta-johns that were still considered serviceable, they had shrapnel damage. So I'm still having to go out and like understand like how, like, you know, it's unsafe because you're in a combat zone, but when you're like really, you step closer to like how severe this is, and honestly, and I hate to say it because I don't want to sound insensitive, but I feel the unit was lucky that we lost one Marine. You know, you see all these other incidents where, you know, it's 4 or 5, it's 20 people. Like, I mean, these situations get out of hand real quick. But you know, there are those things that are triggers for me, and I'm still working on them 20 years later. You know.
It's a different type of experience being a woman, just in general, a woman, right? But then on top of that, being a veteran, and then being a mom, and then, you know, if you choose to have a career, you also throw on top of that a career. So it's different things, you know, different hats that you wear. And it's like kind of like, when do you switch off, you know, kind of thing. So yeah, I think I would say most female veterans probably can relate to that.
And our platoon alone, Sullivan's mom.
Yeah.
She came in right after service.
Yeah.
So did Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
All of you guys.
Yeah.
All right, from serving to being moms.
Yeah. There was even a few, Birch.
Yep.
She was a mom. And not being a mom while we were in Iraq, right? I would just see her just be so upset of missing her kids. And like, I felt so bad, right? But I didn't understand until I became a mom what that really was, what she must have felt. So, you know, that's definitely hard to be a mother and be away from your kids. So, yeah.
you go away, you're gone 15 months, and you do your best to talk, through whatever technology we had, letters, MSN Messenger, but it's not the same, and when I got home, I can remember feeling, and I don't want it to be egotistical at all or masculine, but I felt like maybe she doesn't need me anymore. Like she had been taking care of both kids, working full time, taking care of the house, the dogs, all of it. And there were moments I'm like, do you even need me? And that's, I don't know, on a personal level, that was difficult to walk back in. And she probably had thoughts like, I don't know if I need you for these things anymore, Shawn. So it took some time to work back into how I could be a part of the family, to be honest with you. I had to figure that out myself, and I think she had to figure it out. So, those are some of the costs just in your family. And of course, I could go into the extended family. Everybody's super proud. They're so happy. And all they can talk about is how much you're a hero. And all you can think about is I'm not a hero. I'm just a dude that went with my buddies. We drove down some really dangerous roads and we saw some stuff, but we got home, I didn't ever feel heroic, So there's that too, Jack,
Burnout is a thing, man. And after a while, you get lackadaisical. And I was burned out. And then shit went south. We lost 2 guys a couple weeks later. It fucking sucked too, man, because you went 15 fucking months, and you lose your guys in your fucking last couple months. And you're just like, what the fuck? And yeah. So yeah, I'd rather talk about the fucking fun shit, or the stupid shit. Don't do that shit at home, kids. Don't. But this is the life, man. This is the life that we lead. And it's the only life I know. It has made me who I am, and I'm not sorry about that. I know I'm hard, and I know I'm an asshole a lot, but when it counts, I'm there. And there ain't many of us that can say that anymore. So, yeah.
I turned to several things, and one of them was music. I don't have an addictive personality, I found, so my coping didn't have to do with alcohol or drugs. Mine had to do, it was a lot of inward self-reflection, and what the drums I felt did for me in that third deployment was it was so loud. It's such a loud instrument that I'm doing 2 things at once. I'm letting out aggression while hitting every piece of this kit while simultaneously being drowned out with the thoughts in my head. So the music was so loud, I couldn't think and dwell on those instances where they were the most painful. And afterwards, I felt like I had left it on my drums when I had a moment of despair, or I was just really sad. I was still mourning a lot of the loss that I had. I threw it on my kit. I just dumped it all into my music. And yeah, it carried me through. I would play for hours until my hands were blistered, and my calluses were growing really strong in my hands in those days. And there wasn't a day that I wasn't drumming for those first, especially that first few months after coming home. I missed my drums. And my drums, being such a big instrument and unable to kind of carry it to places, it was always like a prize to come home and play. So when I could shed off, you know, the desert, when I can shed off the mountains in Afghanistan or wherever I was, there was this like prize at the end of the road. I get to sit down and my drums and play. And yeah, that third deployment after that was became kind of a ritual for me to look forward to sitting down and playing my drums.
I think my cost is this. That How I Met Your Mother growing up thing, where you hang out with the same friends all the time, or the Friends, or the Seinfeld, you know, whatever kind of mix of constant people in your life, you just don't have that. You're always getting new people in your life. It's always changing. And it's not bad. But like that's the cost, is that you don't get to have that in your life. I just kind of self-regulate myself to things that I'm familiar with and things that I want to do over and over again, right? Like, there's something so comforting to me to go to a baseball game and sit in my same seats every single game, the same people around me. Like, that's joy.
So I remember it was May 19th, 2014, and I was eating watermelon with the members of my crew, and we were all kind of just celebrating. We knew that deployment was coming to the end. We just had a successful mission that we had done, and everything was good, and you know, everybody was happy. And I got a call from the Sergeant First Class, who was kind of in charge of our group. And he was like, hey man, there's something wrong with your money. We got to get you to come back and do your inventory again, because we had money that needed to be inventoried properly. And so I was super confused because I knew my money was right. I knew I hadn't messed anything up. I knew it was all fine. So I made my way over to battalion headquarters, which, you know, it's like a quarter of a mile in Kandahar. Drove through, just kind of figured it out, and then got there, found a place to park, and I walk in, and they got a chaplain and a whole bunch of people I don't even know in there, and they're like, you got a call from home, you've got a Red Cross call, and you need to call your family. And I mean, what happened was bad enough, but it was bad enough to the point where they weren't even allowed to tell me the truth. The Army was worried about what I might do if I found out what had happened to my son. And so they took my sidearm and they took my rifle and they had me call my family. And when I called my family, they were only allowed to tell me that my son was in the hospital and that he was in a coma. So then it took 2 days for me to get home. I had to travel to Dubai, and in Dubai I had to throw away almost all of my equipment because I couldn't fly. I was way overweight, I had so much gear, and I just had to throw it all away. And I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm only getting pieces of truth because they wouldn't even tell me. And so I'm sitting there planning a life. You know, I'm gonna have to go full-time in the military because this is gonna be crazy to have a kid who's in a coma. And, you know, you're trying to plan what life can look like. And then I got to the airport, and there was a bunch of people from my unit and my wife standing there to welcome me home. And they gave me a police escort, and they drove me to the hospital to see my son on life support. But they had essentially waited for me to get there before they pulled the plug. And so that moment was the end of one life. It was the end of my son's life. And it was the end of my life. The person that I was before May 21st, 2014, it died that day. And it took a while before something else could submerge.
There's things and feelings that you have, you just can't get it out. You know, Memorial Day, I was thinking about Dennis. And I was struggling, and I never do this, but I asked my wife, I said, will you go have a beer with me? Can we go down to the brewery? She said, what? I said, yeah. I need to go have a beer. And so we went down to a local spot, and I had a couple, because I knew I needed to speak words, and I just couldn't get them out. But the only safe place I could do that was with her. I mean, I just cried in the brewery. You know, people watching this think I'm a big crybaby. I'm really not, because I don't like to show that it's vulnerable. I don't like to let it out. Yeah, Memorial Day was tough, but I told her things I've never told her before about the war, and it helped her understand why I am some way the way I am. You know, why do I sometimes almost seem unfeeling? It's because I'm trying to guard myself from whatever might hurt me. So, yeah, those are some regrets I have. But yeah, I'm just very thankful that she's been so patient with me over all these years.
What's your man? I wish you were here with me right now. I feel more of a connection to my father here than I ever did at his gravesite. And it's powerful, man, to come here. All these guys never got welcomed home, and that hurts. And there ain't a lot of Vietnam guys left, and I never got to welcome my father home. Anybody that's out there, welcome home, brothers, because you guys fucking deserve it, man.
You know, it kind of got to the point where, you know, drinking excessively with people that I was friends with at the time. I was very bitter about feeling like my career wasn't where I wanted to be, that, you know, I essentially like lost a lot of friends, not like physically, but you know, they went off to college, they went off to their jobs after high school. It felt like their lives were moving forward in a way that mine wasn't. You know, and not realizing that I had kind of like, you know, grief and a sense of like survivor's guilt over what happened to Captain Brock. Like I basically kind of continued to like, sort of blame myself for a lot of things that were outside my control, and you know, kind of like settled into like some of like the worst feelings that you could have about like who you are as a person and your contributions to society.
I did everything from drown myself in work, to drink alcohol till I'm passed out, to go days without sleeping. I mean, you name it, it's a scary road. Like I said before, it's a very slippery slope, but luckily I had somebody looking down that could give me a hand and help you walk through it.
I think the price of service for me, and with a lot of veterans, is time, relationships, because you have missed time with loved ones. As I've said before, when my daughter was just short of a year, was when I had to deploy to Afghanistan, and I just remember, you know, that moment of watching her sleep in her crib, and you know, me just kind of placing my hand on her and thinking that could possibly be the last time I see her. This is not like, oh, you can get in a car accident, or you know, you can walk across the street, hit by lightning, that kind of, get shot, you know, walking down the street. That never entered my mind. But going to a country where we're actively fighting a war, and realizing I had something at stake, I had something valuable back home to get to, is when I realized my mortality.
My favorite moment was when I got to come home and see my daughter, you know, my family, you know, my mom and stuff, my grandmother. Those are the favorite, you know, bar none, my favorite moments throughout my entire service, because all the time that they put into me. You know, I still remember my grandmother, my aunt, my mom coming to Great Lakes. You know, it was, I went during the winter, it was negative 22 degrees when I went through boot camp. You know, and for my grandmother,
asking somebody who doesn't understand the visuals, the smells, the fear, the emotions of being there, I don't put it on anybody, but it's very lonely. And I envied the active duty component who got to train, live, understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, who knew each other's families, who understood each other's background and their history, and could leave, do a mission, and come back home to the same world that they had left. And then they could bond together over that shared experience. I just didn't have that. I came home and I was alone. And it took a lot of self-starting for me to find the help that I needed. But I did eventually break. I had a really bad PTSD moment when I had come back home one year, and I had blacked out from my PTSD stress, and I woke up in the VA hospital. My parents were there, one of my buddies from the unit. My ex-wife was there, and they were all trying to help me as best they could. And that's part of the guilt too, you know, seeing how my inability of handling my stress was now impacting other people that I loved.
How war affects each of us is so differently. And, you know, it could be anything, but the way we handle those things is different, you know. Mine was to gain a whole bunch of weight when I got home, right? I just ate a lot and drank, and so how we handle things is not always the same, but it affects you regardless, and how you respond to that. I guess it takes you to a couple of places. We're losing too many guys, too many gals, and yeah, and that's why I'm glad I'm a part of this, because we have to tell our story, and it's not easy telling these stories. It's not easy telling you that, you know, maybe my wife wasn't very happy when I got home, you know, like she's happy, but maybe she's not, you know. That's not easy to say. It's not easy to say that my son is, for a decade maybe or more, was kind of holding something in, but he didn't tell me, you know? It's not easy to say out loud. I thought I was a good dad, and I still kind of think I am, but I made mistakes, and Iraq helped me make those mistakes.
You know, everything's a high pace. You're trying to find ways to unwind without getting yourself in trouble or whatever. And, you know, you drink, and then next thing you know, you've had so many that you're just like, what am I doing? So yeah, that definitely impacted me at, at least one point in my career. And it got so bad to one point where, yeah, I mean, I was going down a road where I probably could have ended my career and made some bad choices. Thank God I didn't. But yeah, the drinking, I mean, a lot of people, I'm not the only person that's had that problem in the past, maybe drank too many, but it's good that, I was able to catch it and recognize it and stop that.
And your body, you start to feel the wear and tear just from doing certain things. Like now, I got a new hip and all that stuff. My hearing's gone. But it could always be worse. And I've come to realize that, I'm blessed. I got a chance to meet a soldier. This is going back. I was actually at Fort Huachuca for a senior leadership course, I believe it was SLC. And I'm going into clothing and sales. And I see a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, pushing an E6 staff sergeant in a wheelchair, and his left arm was missing, both legs. He only had his right arm. And I stopped him, and I looked at her, and I said, "Thank you." I thanked her, and I thanked him. I said, "I can't imagine what that cost was for you." And just, you can see the tears in the eyes. And this is, a couple who probably just got started. And he saluted me with that one hand. He saluted me, and I'm just like, I'm blessed. This soldier made a huge sacrifice. His wife made a huge sacrifice. And I think about it all the time. Like, how did that end up? How did that work out? You know, it's easy to say what you would do, but when the time comes, when that is actually the reality, will you be that person? And nobody knows. You can say what you want. Everybody's a hero in their own book. But when that time comes, can you be that strong, that spouse that's, I'm here for you for the duration?
People talk about that when you join the military, you write a blank check, but you never really know what there is that you might be giving away. You never really know what check you're gonna be writing because it's blank and it's anything. And it's until that time runs out, you know? And so I had no idea what the cost was gonna be for me. I had assumed that it would be as simple as the bumps and bruises and getting shot at and all of the different things that did happen. I never understood that it was not just going to have a tertiary effect on my family, but a direct effect.
Yeah, so there are a number of different ways that those experiences in the military could lead to suicidal thoughts and behavior. One of that, like if you think about somebody going in at age 18, maybe experiencing a couple traumatic brain injuries before the age of 25, their brain was not fully formed when those things happened. And depending on the magnitude of the brain injury, their ability to think through or make plans is significantly changed. And so there might be some impulse control there as well. For other people, it might not, or it might be related to not knowing how to carry one of the things that they have seen while they were in service and not knowing how to carry it in terms of being a civilian or at least being discharged from the military.
In 2005, I contemplated suicide. You know, I hadn't talked to anyone that I worked with about what I was going through. You know, I didn't have a stable relationship at the time. All my girlfriends from high school were across the United States. You know, I wasn't getting along with my dad. You know, I just kind of like, as a 21-year-old, kind of really absorbed a lot of things that weren't my burden to bear. And I mean, I kind of like just really kind of sat in this moment of, well, if I see this through, like, how am I going to do it? I was at Tech Escort. It's one of the training schools for my job in the Marine Corps. And I was the only woman on the team, so I didn't have a roommate. And in its own way, like, that's like problematic. So I didn't have someone who was looking and seeing how bad my behavior was getting.
Sexual trauma is it's something that no one should ever go through. But, you know, I just feel that the people just need to be a little bit more understanding and not blame the victim. I feel that there's a lot of people will, you know, that say, well, you shouldn't have been out that late, or you shouldn't have been wearing that, or maybe you shouldn't have been drinking, or there's a lot of victim blaming, and victims shouldn't be blamed or even questioned, you know, whether or not something did happen. So it's just more understanding for the person that comes out and says, hey, I went through this.
And I remember just sitting there thinking, like, well, I've had a decent enough relationship with most everyone in my life. Like, if I'm not here, they're gonna be okay. And, you know, I'm not like a huge religious person. You know, I did kind of have like this one moment sitting there thinking, like, well, like, there's this like conversation to have with God, like, you know, if you're really here, like I want to see it, kind of thing. And then I feel like, again, I'm not here to have someone believe in Christianity or Judaism or whatever. But I think it's like one of those moments where it's kind of like what I needed to do, like the point of sitting with your anger, and really just being like, what the hell, you know, like this is terrible. And honestly, for me, the only thing that was a lifeline was my younger sister, Megan.
If I didn't have faith, right? If I wasn't in definitely the, Catholicism, Catholic faith, 100% I'd be lost. I think my life would probably fall apart rapidly because that's such an integral part of who I am now, and a good part. And I'm actively going down that path. And if I didn't have it, I think I probably would eventually have in short order, family problems, personal life problems, just a whole slew of things. And not to say there's magic behind it, because it's not magic. It's just, it's hard to explain, but if I did not have faith, I think that I would be worse off than I was before joining the military, and the road that I was going to end up going down.
Murder and suicide is closely personally affected me and my wife's community, for sure. We lost a brother of ours that we served with in Iraq. He took his life. He was a chaplain. His name was William Murphy. He was there to help, but I guess what he was going through was too much for him to deal with. And he couldn't help himself. And to me, that's a sad ending to a story, but it's one that we've come quite familiar with within the veteran community, which is, to me, the saddest metric you can measure by, but it's the reality we live in. Recently lost another buddy we served with as well. His name was Shane Herman. But that's part of life.
That's my best friend.
It happens, man. To me, that's the darkest side of a lonely veteran.
There's a code when you're gonna commit suicide, or you feel like you are. You can't tell anybody, right? You can't tell your wife. You just call your buddy and say, I'm in a dark place. Dude, I fucking surprised myself I was there, man. And somehow a week later, maybe like a day later, the VA calls, like, we got a spot for you. Dude, I went in, I fucking broke down. It was exactly what I needed. The timing was perfect and it was lucky, but it might not have been there. And that's, like, there's just not enough to go around. And it's all kinds of people from, all different kinds of veterans, different causes of it, different places in their life. It's a huge resource. It's a great resource. And honestly, it helped me out so much. I told my therapist I need to come less because I'm past it and I know other people need it.
Having people talk about suicide openly is something that can help. Again, not talking about someone who died by suicide is not the right way to go. I think it's also the attitudes that people hold towards suicide. I often heard, like, suicide is the coward's way out, and that is not a helpful message. It's also, if you think about the resources that are out there in postvention, you will not see that message anywhere because it's not helpful. And so I think what we were seeing in those moments is people maybe not knowing how to talk about suicide, so they inserted their own personal beliefs, and that's not the time or the place. And so I think we could get a lot better by referring people back to some of the resources that are there. And if they're not using those resources, better understanding, like, what's preventing you, like, why is it that you feel like your personal ideas about suicide are the things to convey right now, and teaching people how to be as comfortable as they can talking about it. It's powerful just to say, like, I don't know how to talk about it right now. I don't know how to explain what I'm feeling right now. Like, just admitting that can be helpful. And so I think having people have those conversations would go a long way and would go much longer of a way than what's happening right now.
We could definitely do better for each other. Knowing what we know, what we're going through. But just as I felt, I feel like I don't want to put that burden onto somebody else. You know, you always feel like that's your rucksack to carry. But sometimes you need help carrying that rucksack, man. And, you know, watching a lot of people fade away at a very young age is difficult. And you just don't wish that on anybody else, you know? You wanna shield other people from it. And I think the more the veterans talk about it and really, you know, let their voices be heard and their pain felt, it'll make a big ass difference. And I just hope a lot of us have more courage to do so.
Is that when I experienced so much of that darkness and so much of that sense of being alone, once I got the help that I needed, I was able to appreciate the joy. If I had to go through trauma, I at least came out on the other side and dealt with it so that I could have something to compare life to. So that when things get tough here at home, I know what the bottom looks like. It's not that bad. I can get through it. There's another side. When I think things are hopeless, I take a breath and remember there's been worse.
I think the role camaraderie plays is essential to preventing suicide. Like I've said, if you don't have a community to plug into, you wander around, brainwashed from the military, thinking you only have value in a team. So now that I don't have a team, what am I going to do, right? I don't have purpose. I don't have buddies. I don't have anybody to protect, take care of, stand up next to, all the things that camaraderie is, right? And then the bigger purpose of camaraderie is to fight and win together, to have this esprit de corps, this spirit where you embrace the suck together. You eat horrible meals, horrible conditions, you sleep in places that rats don't like to sleep. All the things that you do, camaraderie just isn't going and throwing back a couple of cold ones. It's the trauma bonding. It's the trauma bonding, right? So I think camaraderie is that you and I have both faced some of the same things together.
And if you're thinking about hurting yourself, you know that you can come to me because we've faced those things together. So camaraderie is the key to prevent suicide, to be honest.
You get all these groups of people from all over the country come together at one point for a purpose. That's because we're veterans there together. And to me, it's just beautiful, man. It's more than just proximity. It's a feeling like, it's almost like if you're at home. Like what she said, a feeling of comfort, like a feeling of, you know, these people will understand my voice. Because I think that's where veterans struggle a lot. You know, they feel like there's no value in their story. Like there's no purpose in that. And there is. There's purpose in pain. I think that's the bloodline of keeping the veteran community together, is being around each other. You know, and that's just the recipe for that's the magic recipe right there, man. The proximity. I think that, you know, even over Zoom, I've had multiple Zoom meetings, but it's different when we're together in one room. You know, the energy's different. And I think that speaks volumes. Just being, that's it, man.
This is the final product, right? You want to bring some over?
Yeah.
These look so good.
We wanna...
Not mine. Mine are the weirdly shaped ones.
You're fine.
Bring yours. And so tell us the name again of...
This is laffa bread.
Laffa bread.
And again, I'm going to tell everyone, like, I've only made this myself, okay. So it's not necessarily truly authentic. So I don't want people to assume, like, if this is not done right, like, this is our attempt. This is our attempt.
And our respectful attempt.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we wanna.
This is really good. This is amazing.
I'm glad you like it.
Oh my gosh! And I baked bread for the first time.
I know you were so nervous about it.
Well, you've seen the ones that didn't make it.
No, this is good. I mean, it's got just like a little bit of texture. One of the things I love most about Iraq is it's got like amazing sunrises and sunsets, and I think that. Something that gets lost, because when you think of something being like a war zone, you just think like the worst of it. But it's like,
there's families that live there.
We brought ourselves there. We made it a war zone, and I hope, especially during my lifetime, that you know, Iraq can go back to the country that it deserves to be. I would love to see them be like an absolutely beautiful nation where the people there feel safe. So yeah, I mean.
That's really beautiful.
I think it'd be great.
What a beautiful wish. Thank you so much.
I don't know if you're going to ask this later or not, but I figure I'd segue into it since we're there. Best day of my career. That was a junior E6, brand new. I got promoted on the deployment, going back into Iraq. And I got randomly selected, voluntold, interview, whatever the fuck you want to call it, to go be a platoon sergeant. Dude, I barely ran my team, or my squad, I should say. But I love those fucking 8 idiots. I do. Still do anything for them to this day. But my best day was when I took that platoon and I brought them home. I brought 21 guys into a combat zone and I brought 21 guys home. Regardless of what we did, cool guy shit, like all that's fleeting, man. Like Patton said, all glory is fleeting. So when I rest my head at night on my pillow, I brought 21 guys home out of a combat zone. Not many people can say that. That's my best day.
My son's never coming back. He isn't. And I hate that. But I have 3 other kids. And actually, really, I have a 4th kid too. My niece was born during COVID. And she's like a second or a third kid to me, or 5th kid to me, you know? I don't even know how many kids I have, so many kids. But, you know, it's awesome the way that my heart opened up after my niece was born. It's just allowed me to go to a different place. And it's given me, it's allowed me to tear down barriers. I had a lot of barriers because of losing my son and having my niece come into our lives, just kind of like this helpless little thing who needed help. Like, was really happy to do it. And it's allowed me to love my daughter in ways that I had trouble with before. So that was a big impact that my service had. Was my kids lost their brother, and they really lost me for a long time.
I'm glad you didn't give up.